Mahomes' first game back from his injury that he missed time with. The Chiefs had a fumble. Damian Williams had fumbled. The Titans returned that for a touchdown. The Titans won the game, but if you look at the numbers, I mean, the Chiefs dominated this game. They outgained them in yards, 530 to 371. They outpossessed the ball in time of possession, 38 to 22, and they had more first downs than the Chiefs by a total of 28 to 19. Derrick Henry, that first game, did have 188 yards and 2 touchdowns, including a very long touchdown. At the end of the game, Ryan Tannehill threw a 23-yard touchdown to Adam Humphries to win the game. I think this is going to be a close game. It's going to be 19 degrees in Kansas City, so it'll be very chilly, so that might favor the Titans in that aspect. Derrick Henry just running the ball down your throat as it gets cold. But at the same time, the Chiefs are a different team in Arrowhead. They're only 5-3 at home this year, but when you look at it, those 3 games they lost, the Colts, the Texans, the Packers, all 3 of those games were games where Patrick Mahomes was injured. He got injured in the Colts game. So yeah, the 3 games where he got injured that they played at home were the games they lost. He's undefeated at home this year. I think the Titans are going to give the Chiefs a real scare. I think it's going to be higher scoring than people would imagine. I think that this is the Titans can't go in here and say, we're going to take this one thing away from the Chiefs and make them do this one thing. Because Patrick Mahomes is good enough to just surpass that. I mean, the Patriots couldn't do that to him last year. Couldn't do that to the Titans last year. And the Titans aren't facing a guy who has a noodle arm at this point like Tom Brady does, or who's maybe not as polished of a passer like Lamar Jackson is. So I'm going to I think Kansas City wins outright. I think they're going to win. It's going to be a higher scoring game. I'd say 31-28 might probably be the score. I take the Titans to cover. I take the over 53. I think a Chiefs 49ers Super Bowl is what we're looking for, and that's great for the game. 2 young quarterbacks. A veteran coach looking for his first Super Bowl win. A legacy coach, a young coach who people hold in very high regard, looking for his first Super Bowl win. 2 very good uniforms. Now moving on to the second type of football that was played this evening, the College Football National Championship between LSU and Clemson. I mean, Clemson put up a fight for the first half. LSU's just maybe the best team of all time. Joe Burrow definitely had the best single season for a college quarterback ever. I would still say best college quarterback ever for an entire career is probably Tim Tebow. But one season, definitely Joe Burrow. 5,600 yards, 60 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, completing 76% of his passes. And then on the biggest stage of them all, in the national championship game, he goes 31 for 49, 463 yards, 5 touchdowns. Also had 58 yards rushing with a touchdown. And they just, for the better part of 2.5 quarters, just dominated Clemson. I mean, LSU was down 17-7 in the second quarter. And they turned around and ripped off 21 consecutive points. Clemson scores again. And then they rip off another 14 consecutive points, putting the game away. Tamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Thad Moss all have great games for the Tigers. The point where I thought it changed for the Clemson offense was when LSU looked like decided to spy ATN and Lawrence down low with the middle linebacker number 8 Queen, because he had a couple big hits and he had a couple He had a sack. He had a couple tackles for loss on ATN. He stopped him from getting those big yards. And Clemson's a very, very good team. They're going to be right back here next year, just like they've been for the last 4 or 5 years. Dabo Swinney's got a machine rolling there. I think LSU's going to take probably a year or so to get back to this point. But this single team, this single season, LSU is probably the best team ever. I'm going to compare it to the 2001 Miami Hurricanes, who a lot of people say is. But I think a lot of people look at that team and really all they look at is the roster. And that's unfair when comparing that roster to this LSU team, because we know how good that roster is because of how their NFL careers played out. This LSU team hasn't had a chance to show us how great they are by how this plays out. I mean, Justin Jefferson could have just as good a career as Andre Johnson. There could be a freshman on LSU who ends up having as good of a career as Sean Taylor. Grant Delpit could have as good of a career as Ed Reed. Like, we don't know. It's probably not going to happen because those are some of the best players of all time. But it could happen, so it's an unfair advantage. So I'm taking the NFL careers of these guys completely out of it. We look at what they did in college. LSU scored more points, gave up less points. LSU's beaten 7 teams that were ranked in the top 10 at the time that they played. They won a game at number 9 Texas, home against number 7 Florida, home against number 9 Auburn, at number 3 Alabama. I want to remind you that's Alabama with Tua Tagovailoa. They won a neutral site game that was maybe not neutral site in Atlanta against Georgia. It's a lot of Georgia fans. A neutral site game against Ohio, and then what could be a de facto home game against Clemson. Georgia is ranked 4. I said Ohio. I meant Oklahoma. Oklahoma was ranked 4. Clemson was ranked 3. And they beat the preseason top 4 teams, Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson, and Georgia. Side note, I don't know why I keep saying Ohio when I look at OU. It's a Marshall thing because Ohio University is OU also, and they're one of Marshall's rivals. So that's the only reason why that mistake keeps happening. And also because I have something to get to about Joe Burrow later that involves the University of Ohio. Or Ohio University, sorry. Back to the subject at hand. When you compare that to the Miami team, it's a great roster, but you look at the actual year they played that year. They had 2. LSU's only real close win that you could say was... I mean, they really didn't have a close win, actually, when you look at it. They beat... Auburn was a 2-possession game that became a 1-possession game after Auburn scored in garbage time. Alabama scored in garbage time to make that a 1-possession game. Texas scored in garbage time to make that a 1-possession game. Florida was a 14-point game. They crushed Georgia. They crushed Oklahoma. They crushed Clemson. Miami, I mean, they beat Florida State comfortably, who's number 13. Miami had 1 top 10 win compared to LSU's 7. Their 1 top 10 win was in the game that locked the national championship for them against Nebraska, who had the Heisman winner Eric Crouch. But Nebraska had just gotten blown out by Colorado in the Big 12 championship. So I don't know how much not the Big 12 championship, it was their last game of the season, their rivalry against Colorado. I don't know if you can put, because Nebraska only dropped to number 4 because they were already number 2 and they wanted to give Miami a top 4 team to play against. Miami had close wins on the road against number 14 Virginia Tech, 26-24. It's a 2-point win. And then on the road against Boston College, who's unranked, probably 4-4, my guess would be. They won that game 18-7. But that was the game where Boston College was down 11-7 going into score, and you have the fumble recovery by the big lineman. He's running the field, and Ed Reed rips it out of his own lineman's hands and returns it for a touchdown. That's that game. So that's closer than the 18-7 score would say, because that's one big crazy play made that changes the whole scope of the game. All year, Miami only had 5 ranked wins on the road against Florida State. They blew out Syracuse at home. Syracuse was number 15. Florida State was number 13. They blow out Washington at home. Washington was number 11. They beat Virginia Tech. They beat Nebraska. They beat Nebraska 37-14 in the national championship. Again, how good was that Nebraska team? We don't know. That Nebraska team also has a connection to Joe Burrow that we will talk about in a second. So right now, I would say this LSU team is the best team of all time, and I'm willing to hear arguments because I know my dad says that the 1996 Nebraska team is the best team of all time, Tommy Frazier and Lawrence Phillips. But I'd like to hear arguments. So go ahead, tweet me with arguments. Who do you think is the best college football team of all time? Because I think it's LSU. We're going to something a little personal here. Because as a Cincinnati Bengals fan, I'm going to talk about Joe Burrow. And before I talk about Joe Burrow, I just want to say that this is going to be completely biased. And this might be saved. I might come across looking like an idiot in a couple of years for saying this. Joe Burrow is going to be the best NFL quarterback of all time. He's going to win multiple Super Bowls with the Bengals. He'll probably win 8 games his first year just because of how good he is. His dad, Jimmy Burrow, was a football coach. He's been a football coach for a while. Played at Nebraska. Coached at Nebraska. Was the offensive coordinator for that Nebraska team that lost to Miami. Also the offensive coordinator for the Nebraska. Also was a quarterback's coach for the Nebraska team that won the national championship in 1996. In 1997. Or no, not 97. 98 was the year they shared it with Michigan. He's also coached at North Dakota State for Craig Bowl. And now he's at the University of Ohio. He has been there since 2003, where he's been the offensive coordinator for former Nebraska coach Frank Solich. So Joe Burrow, from Athens, Ohio, that's where he played college. That's where he played high school football. It's 2.5 hours away from Cincinnati, so he's a hometown kid if he goes there. And it works on a deeper level than just Joe Burrow being a great quarterback. It was great for the Bengals in terms of a pick, and probably the easiest first-round pick in years. His two older brothers played defense. They were on Nebraska teams with Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor is currently the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, so that's a connection they have. They know each other. Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow have actually met several times, just when Joe was in high school and Zach was a coordinator. Zach had tried to recruit him to the University of Cincinnati when he was at Cincinnati. But Joe Burrow's going to be successful, but the amount of success Joe Burrow has comes down to how committed are the Bengals to building this offense around him. And I think there's a level where, because Zach Taylor's a family friend, that Zach Taylor's going to take this fairly seriously. And you have the O-line's a big problem. The O-line's been a problem. You can look at when the Bengals stopped going to the playoffs and when they stopped sucking, and when they started sucking, and you can draw that line right where we were too cheap to pay Kevin Zeitler and we were too cheap to pay Andrew Whitworth. Zeitler made the all-decade team as a guard. Whitworth went to the Super Bowl as the starting left tackle of the Los Angeles Rams. So when we got cheap and we stopped spending money on the O-line is when we started to be bad, because now Andy Dalton doesn't have time. And then we go out and we blow first-round draft picks on Cedric Ogbuehi. We blow a draft pick on Luke Fisher in the second round, who was at Oregon. We go out and we sign Bobby Hart, and he stinks. And we give him an extension last year for some reason. Billy Price, we take in the first round. He gets hurt, and he's really not the same. Although I do think he might have a spot to play in our future. What it all amounts to is how much capital the Bengals going to put into protecting Joe Burrow